Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in. Welcome back to Turn Down for What. Another day.
Another episode.
Thank you, Chris. Today we have a good one. Last week we actually got to Jesse and I kind of laid out the history of Power Up and what Jesse and I had done for the roadmap to build and to launch Power Up. And we got to introduce the Power Up America website, which was really awesome. And we've had some decent feedback as far as the introduction of that and seeing some positive feedback. We were really excited to bring that to the table. But today we wanted to kind of even go further back and tell a unique storyline that we've not necessarily mentioned. And so I'm going to add this into kind of our building a CPO series that we're going to have as far as how we've built Power Up. But a very, very essential part that we mentioned last week on the podcast was that, we had established this partnership with the Kimbro family, and they are helping us and partnering with us and accelerating our move to be the premier charging partner of the Southeast. And so with that, we have the privilege today of bringing on Des Carlisle, who is the chief of staff of the Kimbro companies. Is that the official title?
You can call it that. Every day's different, right?
Yeah. You are the jack of all trades and pretty much the glue that holds everything together. So there's no title that really kind of puts you into a box. But you got the privilege of bringing Des on, who's been an instrumental part of our relationship and really growing with the Kimbro family, and wanted to introduce Des to kind of help tell the story that we didn't mention last week as far as the history of the Kimbro family and kind of some unique things that kind of ushered them into a partnership with us. So, Des, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys so much for having me today. It's exciting to finally get on after all these years and episodes later.
What's funny is one of the early conversations we had, you had kind of listened to us on the podcast. And I think that was one of the early bits that kind of helped us begin to gel in that relationship. And now here we are. We've known each other for like almost a year and a half, 2 years now. And like we are just now getting you on the podcast. Des has done a lot of good, and I'll let you kind of tell your story, but you've done a lot and been heavily involved in standing up Jesse's favorite, the Southeastern Hydrogen Alliance.
Hydrogen.
And that was actually kind of how we got introduced. But before we kind of get to that step, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself, and we'll start there, and then we'll kind of dive back into the history of the Kimbro family.
That sounds awesome. Well, again, thank you guys for having me today. It's always a pleasure to be with you. So I'll share a little bit of my story. Born and raised, small town, Oklahoma. I joke small town is in like real small town, no stoplight. My graduated high school with 36 people, and almost everyone I knew growing up was in oil and gas. Roughnecks, pumpers, all of those types of things. And so found my way to the University of Oklahoma and, of course, did what I knew, which was oil and gas. And so I double majored in energy management, entrepreneurship. Right out of school, went straight to Houston, worked for a large E&P company. I started my career as a landman. Maybe 6 months ago, nobody knew what that was, but now that there's this famous TV show, everybody knows what that is. And yes, it is almost that accurate and that much fun, but I could never been tied to a chair, so that's good. But yeah, started my career there. I worked 10 years for a company called Southwestern Energy. Really worked on a lot of different things, mainly on the land side. Worked the Marcellus Shale out of Houston and learned a ton from the corporate side, a ton of how energy really fuels our country and our world. And about 4 years ago, I moved to Nashville. Long story of how I got to Nashville. Sometimes you just take a big risk and it works out, but that's kind of what happened. And so I moved to Nashville. I found myself flying back and forth to Houston every week, and I was newlywed and thought, this is crazy. And through a friend of a friend, I ended up having coffee with Bill Kimbro. And I knew a little bit about the Kimbros. If you live here in Nashville, you know they're a strong oil and gas family who's been around for years and years. But I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then I'll tell you about that coffee date I had with Bill. So the Kimbro family started in 1951, March 15th of 1951. Their father, Harlan, started right here where we still sat on 9 acres in the middle of Nashville, selling tires and batteries and accessories. He worked with a gentleman by the name of Ed Oakley, and they had really built up this customer base, and Ed was retiring, and Harlan saw a great opportunity to partner with Amoco at that time. Amoco was having jobber ships come available. And so in 1968, he took over the business fully. And in the 1970s, he incorporated Kimbro Oil Company. And Kimbro Oil Company has really been the heart of the family businesses. Harlan was a big believer that you always invest around the fuel pump. So through that, the family has made a lot of different investments around the fuel pump, everything from real estate to construction companies, to a sign company that puts up signs at the fueling station, even water bottling that puts water at the stations, but it's always revolved around the fuel pump. And so their largest investment was in 2000 with the Jewell family. They made a large JV with Shell called TriStar Energy, and that's really fueled most of the growth we've seen in the last 25 years. Leading really in the C-store industry here in the greater Tennessee area through their brands of Twice Daily and Sun Service. So when I met Bill that day, I thought, this is awesome. I've spent 10 years upstream. Bill's family is mid to downstream. This is going to get to see a whole new piece of the oil and gas industry. We were about 10 minutes into that coffee date, and he said, hey, Des, I don't want to talk about oil and gas. And I thought, oh no, what do you want to talk about? He said, I want to talk about my grandkids. And I want to talk about what I believe is in the future of the energy portfolio. And at that point, he said, I believe part of the future is hydrogen fuel. As Jesse says, yeah.
Hydrogen.
To be completely honest, I sat there and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I hadn't heard hydrogen since 7th grade science. And so he kept going on and on about how it was happening in Europe and it was coming to California and how it could really be a fuel of the future. And so we ended up having breakfast every week for 4 months, getting to know each other. And he asked me to come on and work directly for the family and see what we could do in hydrogen. So that's how we met and how we got started. If you would have told me I was coming from oil and gas to talk about hydrogen or alternative fuels, I would have said, there's no way, right? But quickly, I learned that it was part of the portfolio. And, you know, we often say here at Kimbro, we don't believe traditional fuels are going anywhere, but we believe the percent of the portfolio may be changing in the future. And we want to make sure our percent of that portfolio stays the same, which is the whole portfolio. And so after that first year, I really came back. I traveled the country. If I was going to talk about hydrogen, I wanted to know every detail about it. I wanted to know how it was produced, how it was used in a car. I wanted to drive a light duty vehicle, ride in a Class 8 truck, see the forklifts. I wanted all of that. And so the family gave me that opportunity to learn as much as I could. I came back, and what I quickly realized is that they may have been ready to invest in Tennessee, but Tennessee wasn't ready, right? We were one of only, at that point, one state in the Southeast producing hydrogen in Charlton, Tennessee, about 10 tons a day. A company called Universal Hydrogen, which was later acquired by Plug Power. And nobody really even knew that was happening. Most of the forklifts here in Tennessee were ran on hydrogen. Nobody knew that was happening. And so quickly, we knew that we couldn't just go make a big investment. The education wasn't there. The policies weren't there. And so I sat around the table, and the family continued to talk through where their place was in the future. And yet again, they surprised me. They did something I wasn't used to, right? Coming from corporate America, it's all about ROIs and how this investment's going to make a full circle investment. And they said, Des, what if we made a legacy investment? What if we helped prepare the Tennessee market for what is to come. We help educate those who need this education. I said, I love it. I have no idea where to start, but let's try. And so we were toying with the idea of how do we start like a Tennessee Hydrogen Business Council, an organization here to really help drive education and policy and community engagement so that when the time was right, we'd have a front row seat and be ready to invest. Around that same time, through Clean Cities Network, who also introduced Jesse and I, which I'll talk about in a second, I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Scott McWhorter. Dr. McWhorter was and still is the chairman of the board of the Southeast Hydrogen Energy Alliance. SHEA is what it's often called. And so SHEA had actually started in 2006, almost 20-year-old trade organization. And through time, they had realized that, hey, we've got to be bigger than South Carolina. So they had reimagined themselves into a 10-state regional organization. When Scott and I met, I often joke we both had what each other needed. I say he had the PhDs and the expertise, an amazing board of directors, an amazing group who was willing to just roll up their sleeves and put in the work. But they didn't have the capital per se to do the work that was needed from an education and marketing perspective. And so instead of creating something in Tennessee, we immediately said, why don't we join forces? Why don't we help relaunch SHEA with brand new marketing, brand new education tools? And really, instead of lifting Tennessee, we could lift the Southeast here. And so that's exactly what the Kimbros did. They made an angel investment into this organization in the summer of 23. And then we completely relaunched the organization and relaunched it April of 2024. So we just celebrated a little over a year ago of our relaunch. And it really has three very clear pursuits. How do we drive innovation and collaboration? That to us is how do we help bring partners together to really do the work? Second is all about education. How do we help educate? At SHEA, that's such a big word and it can mean so many things. And so we really look at it as a triangle model. And we say, how do we partner with state energy offices, state economic development, and clean cities? Because we believe that partnering with those three organizations and being the backbone to help come into the state will help it flourish in the state. And then finally, policy enablement. Our policymakers are given so many things daily. And it's hard to keep up with all the different topics, alternative fuels, not alternative fuels, healthcare, everything in between. And so we really wanted to be that trustworthy, incredible place that they could learn about hydrogen. Maybe even as simple as what unit of measurement it's in. It's funny, we've had states pass bills in the wrong unit of measurement. So just trying to show those really basic things. So I was so excited to serve as executive director of SHEA on behalf of the Kimbro family for the past year and a half to really help stand that organization back up. And it's doing amazing. You should check it out if you have any interest in hydrogen. I know we're talking about EVs today, but it's still how Jesse and I came together. And so I guess it was around March, we were getting ready to relaunch. So early spring of 24, Jesse, through Clean Cities Network, reached out to me and said, hey, I have all these crazy ideas. I want to talk about hydrogen. And about 30 minutes into the conversation,
she pulled a Bill Kimbro on Jesse. You know?
Yes, about 30 minutes into the conversation, I said, wait, Jesse, there's something else here. What's this EV thing you keep talking about? And so invited him down. He was going to be in Nashville and said, let's grab lunch. We had lunch, and you guys can probably tell the story better than I can from that point. But that was the start of a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations, a lot of opportunities. And, you know, I think more than anything, the family saw a passion and a drive and invested in two guys with a really great idea of how we bring this together. What's different about the Kimbro family than I think a lot of businesses is their focus is so hardcore on one thing, and that is the end user. It's not what the gas station looks like or what's inside or how much fuel goes through. It is the experience of the end user. And so that's why, you know, we have been pitched a million different EV options. But when we heard Power Up and we started thinking, we realized that that's how aligned we were. It was all about the end user and the experience, which differentiated. And so it's been an awesome partnership to watch the Kimbro family and the Power Up guys come together and to really build business plans to be that premier end user provider here in the Southeast. So I think I took up way too much time, told you 10 different stories, but that's how we got to the table.
Des pulled a Jesse. I mean, this is a weird world we live in, you know.
It's an awesome origin story, though, and what I always find compelling is that so many things of innovation and significance start with a connection to community, and I think that's the common thread. Whether it's from where you began, Des, in your small town community, to where you evolved to, and where the fellas evolved to, it's all about community, and that's the basis of everything. And I think it's easy to try to want things to change in your area, in your community, in your local jobs, and that kind of thing. But it's different to really impact it in that way. And I think that's what I admire most. And I love hearing the story of the synergy between the two. And I think you're right. There's so many common threads in a meaningful way. So that's really cool to hear it.
Well, for me too, it's something that for our listeners, you can get an understanding now of how our company has also been changed by the relationship with the Kimbro family, because they are excellence at the pump. We are learning not only what an EV driver wants, but we also get to ask the questions to people with tens of years and decades of experience. Hey, what do people want here? It changes some of the things that we have had our plans for. And obviously, my personal long-term goal is also hydrogen. I feel that there's a huge spot for that, but it's all about the excellence at the pump. And I think that Josh and I have really benefited from the feedback and our education of EV drivers, going to sites, knowing what we don't want, knowing what we can't do with other people's locations, has prepared us to launch this Kentucky location, which is everything we would hope to be as an EV driver. And then that goes back into the Kimbro Oil Company of saying, okay, if you're going to make it the best. And I think that that is something that excites me about our future, because, it's still unknown what direction a lot of these grants are going in, which is a big part of our company at Power Up. But we're also learning that there's a lot of opportunities out there to provide something better than everybody else, and that people will go to it even if there is no incentives involved. And a lot of that is just taking the examples of the Kimbro family and talking to them and giving that opportunity to us to go out and provide excellence in this, again, different pump, but it's still around the pump. And I think that's just something that excites Josh and I to really be happy that this partnership happened. And shout out to Jonathan Overlay for the introduction. So
obviously it's been a unique juncture and bringing those in, but it's one of those things that, two hillbillies from East Tennessee had a really good idea. Jesse more of a hillbilly than I am. I'll give him that. But we had a good idea, and we were working to build a value proposition that really was able to deliver what our vision was for that. And I think you bring in a legacy of excellence at refueling, and that was really the catalyst and the accelerant that we needed to really hone in. There's been Des has been a coach, if you will, on trying to smack us into shape and make Jesse and I into at least one half decent executive. I think the two of us together can get to the position of one, and that's partially due to the insights and critiques from Des. So she's more of a mentor at this point than anything, because she may not seem like it, but I think she could probably run any company in the nation. She could be the president for all I care. I mean, she could.
Well, I appreciate you guys are too kind, but it's been a joy to work alongside you and to watch you grow.
Yeah, and I think that the major thing to note is that the excellence at the pump and just really seeing evolution. And we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how legacy OEMs, the evolution and staying with how the market and how technology continues to evolve. We all stand under the precedence that gas isn't going anywhere. There's a whole segment of people that might push into the vein that electric has to be 100% of the market. That's not a reality, and that's not the way that this market should evolve. Gas very much still has a real place in our market, and traditional oil is going to maintain that large market share of dominance. However, there is a market segment in which electric vehicles are relevant and are a practical use case for people's lives, and we want to be able to provide refueling capabilities to those individuals with excellence. And I think that we've seen, and I really honestly personally don't even understand this, but the larger market has kind of made the EV charging industry more of an afterthought, and we are taking that and saying, hey, we're going to make the Southeast excellent in our production of what an EV charger should be. And we're still early in the evolution of the EV market, specifically in a lot of these southeastern states. But states like Georgia and Florida, you're seeing 10, 15, 20% market share now in the new vehicle sales. And that's a relevant chunk of the market that needs to be serviced. And we can take that legacy and take the idea that Jesse and I had, which was doing charging excellently in the Southeast, and really take the Kimbro legacy and execute on that excellently. Jesse semi-glitching.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, do what?
Excellently.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I think that the important message, and Des, you can kind of back this up. I don't think it's oil or electric. I think it's oil and electric, and figuring out how those combine in a way that, you know, all drivers have that service.
100%. I mean, it goes back to that end user. You know, we often joke here that if the consumer wanted Gatorade, we pump Gatorade. And it's about that end user, and it's about creating an experience of whatever we're pumping, making sure it's not just in a corner of a parking lot uncovered. That the electric vehicle user gets the same experience as a diesel driver, a gasoline driver. Hopefully one day that hydrogen driver gets that same experience too. And so, yeah, for us, we don't really care. We just want we want to make sure that we are understanding the portfolio and educating ourselves constantly on the different factors within the portfolio. But more than anything, the end user is taken care of. We take care of the end user, everything else will take care of itself.
Absolutely.
So when you look at this, obviously, you know, our podcast is heavily talking about electric, and we've kind of shown what we are going to be doing, and we've shown now what our vision for EVs are, and it's been accepted very well by a lot of experts that we've talked to. We've since last week, we've got a lot of calls from people who are in this industry, you know, praising a lot of the aspects of our charging station. So that part of it, obviously, we're all going to be working together to come up with those solutions. But since you're so close with the hydrogen side, and now that the big beautiful bill has done its thing, so we now know what that is, what do you see as especially from your point of view, which is much higher than mine right now, since we've been focusing on this, where do you see hydrogen going in the next couple of years, since we do have a few more years of this IRA?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. You know, I can speak to hydrogen from a Southeast perspective, which is good and bad. So I'll back up a little bit and say, you know, we had to change our messaging when we didn't get a hub. And when the Southeast was left off of the hub conversation, we changed our messaging to not, oh no, we didn't get a hub, to how lucky are we didn't get a hub, which is funny. And I've said that in front of DOE before, but at the end of the day, one really cool part of the hydrogen economy here in the Southeast is it's not driven by incentives. We have true projects going in the ground that are opening right now. Today you have 21 Class 8 trucks in the Port of Savannah running today by Hyundai. And those are all based on true economics and not extra incentives. And so I think as much as we want 45V, as much as we want the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law when it came to hydrogen, we would like them, But in the Southeast, we're lucky we're not based on them. And I think the Southeast is the only region in the country that's like that. So it's really going to be interesting to see. My personal opinion, not my Shea opinion, my personal opinion is that in 5 years from now, the hydrogen headquarters will be the Southeast. And it may not be these multi-billion-dollar projects that we hear going around the country, but it's going to be real sustainable projects. I mean, the hydrogen movement in a lot of ways was started right here in the Southeast with all the forklifts. We have over 60,000 forklifts here running on hydrogen today, all based on economics.
Yeah, I think that it's the same. It's very similar with the EV story, but I think that the two different understandings, and I mean, my limited knowledge of hydrogen is, hydrogen is going to be the next step of evolution, likely for heavy duty trucking, and it's already in motion, but that's where the economics are really supported by that. It's very difficult, especially with the cost of infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, and everything else to get light duty and passenger cars to hydrogen. I think we're a long way potentially from seeing that executed, but there's a very, very soon statement, especially with companies like Hyundai that are coming out with these XCN trucks. Jesse actually got to drive one 2 months ago, where Jesse got all sparkly when he got to go drive one. It's on the channel, but that technology within the heavy duty trucking is revolutionary when it comes to that, and infrastructure is going to be able to begin to expand and build out pathways for these trucks to begin to make their routes. Already they're doing it at the Port of Savannah. I think they go to Atlanta and back. Is that correct?
Yes, throughout the Southeast, they're opening a station. Hydrofleet's opening a station about 10 minutes outside of Savannah in Pooler, Georgia. And I think, Josh, you're right on when we talk about heavy and medium duty. I think you guys said it well, even when you were talking about EV adoption. At the end of the day, we have to look at what is the use case. And here's our toolbox of energy solutions and what fits that use case the best. And the more we can do that, than to say, like, this is the demand rate, or this is how we have to transition X number of cars or X number of vehicles to this fuel, the more the consumer wins, right? And the more the demand will grow. We do see it being a complete disruptor and game changer in medium to heavy duty trucks that run all day, every day, that weight is an issue, and that zero emissions matters. You have certain states that's required. And so batteries sometimes get us too heavy, or they don't go long enough, or their charge time's too much. Gasoline and diesel have too many emissions. So if I'm in that particular situation, hydrogen's a no-brainer. It's zero emissions. We've got about a 500-mile radius with about a 15-minute refuel time.
So with the fuel distribution network is a big part of what Kimbro does. Are these things separately run to where hydrogen is a component, gas is a component, or or are you trying to kind of intertwine these where you would have all of the transportation at some point where it makes sense become hydrogen transportation that transports the fuel? Like, where are those markets handled completely separately, or are they integrated in some way operationally?
Yeah, great question, Chris. Pretty much completely separate. I mean, nothing to say we can't have a fuel cell truck that's hauling diesel, right? Nothing to say that. Right now, they're just too expensive. We've got to figure out ways to get them down. We've got to figure out ways to produce hydrogen on site. I think that the case study happening, like I mentioned, in Pooler, Georgia, with Hydrofleet and Hyundai is an amazing case study that's going to open up a lot of opportunities here throughout the Southeast of how do we do this from an economic standpoint, not just an initiative or a government-driven standpoint. And then it's got to be newer technology to make the economics work. So I think eventually it could be a collaboration, of the different fuels. Like I said, you may have a fuel cell hydrogen truck hauling 8,000 gallons of diesel. But it's too early to know on that piece.
When you look at when you look at those numbers, because I just don't know the ins and outs of them. I mean, I've been to ACT Expo a couple times, and it's always fascinating to see the hydrogen. And out here in California, we've really ebbed and flowed in that way. At one point, we had a really, we had a really robust hydrogen network with a lot of vehicles. Even the Toyota was out here for a long time and being heavily seen on the roads. And then it like really kind of pivoted the opposite direction in the past year. And a lot of things have changed and kind of not had the progress there. But I don't necessarily understand the financials of it. Like where is the barrier? Is it like when they look at the number, is the initial purchase of the truck the big thing that is hard to recover from? Is the fuel in terms of like cost? And I don't know how it's measured, where gas is gallons, miles per gallon or whatever that fuel cost is. When it comes to the hydrogen cost of the fuel per mile, is that also more expensive, or do you recover some of that? The maintenance, is that similar? Like without getting too in the weeds, I mean, can you kind of at a Chris level of not being very intelligent, can you break it down simply?
I like sticking at that Chris level. I am a kindergarten, elementary level when it comes to this stuff, and I like staying there. That's a great question. I mean, I think it is kind of all of the above. Trucks right now are running $500,000-$600,000 on the cheaper side for a fuel cell Class 8. You've seen two big truck manufacturers go bankrupt this year with Hyzon and Nikola, and the cost of fuel is too much. It's based on a kilogram, and we need that to be lower. We need that to be $7-ish a kilogram to be comparable to maybe a $5 diesel, give or take a little bit. And the last time I looked in California, you guys were north of $30 a kilogram. And it ebbs and flows, right? They often say when we look at forklifts, if you have more than 50 forklifts in your fleet, it makes economic sense to switch away from like a propane to a hydrogen based on a direct supply. So for instance, we have Plug Power with two huge plants here in the Southeast. Like I said, the one in Charleston, Tennessee, and then we have one in Georgia. Both together are making about 27 tons a day. And most all of that hydrogen is powering forklifts here in the Southeast. That's a different source of direct distribution than you guys have in California. And so they're able to keep their prices where the total cost of ownership of those forklifts makes sense here when you're comparing. But when you talk about Class 8 trucks, I mean, it's all of the above currently. The only thing I would say is maintenance. So just like if you buy an electric vehicle, your maintenance is lower than a gas-powered vehicle because there are less parts. Exact same thing, right? Like a fuel cell is an electric vehicle. The difference is an EV has more batteries. You plug it in, it holds the electricity and uses it as it drives. A hydrogen fuel cell has a battery. And the hydrogen, the pure form hydrogen, so typically when we find hydrogen in our atmosphere, it's always a compound element. So to get it to use it as a power source, we have to separate that. So again, H2O, you separate the hydrogen and the oxygen. You take pure form hydrogen, you pump it in. It's attracted to the outside oxygen, and that is what creates the electricity on board. You guys probably already know that. That's just my very elementary way of talking about hydrogen. But when you think about the motor itself, it's just like an EV, less batteries. It's just doing the electricity on board instead of storing it and then using it.
And I think it's very similar to your points that you just made, Des. It's very similar of a conversation. As you see with the EV space, we've been dealing with some different major heavy-duty trucking companies, medium-duty trucking companies that are trying to sell the EVs through, Kenworth and Bollinger has their product. And, the issue that you face is the cost of entry for the vehicle is too high. And, the recovery of that in the EV space, the fueling is cheaper for the most part, especially if you are refueling at your home port. But the issue that you have is that a traditional truck, let's just say a class, the class 4 was that Bollinger truck that we looked at. The traditional the class 4 truck might land you at like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. I don't know that exact number, but the EV version's $200,000. And so you have to save enough fuel to recover almost double the expense. And it's an economy of scale thing. We have to get battery technology better to where we can get lower costs for the battery packs. You're dealing with the cost of the cost recovery. The fueling does save you the money, but how long does it take you to recover $100,000? And so that's where it has taken these federal incentives. There was a local state program that was out in Tennessee as of like 3 weeks ago, where you could basically replace an old beat up diesel for the EV, and they'd give you, I think it was 70% of the cost off or something like that. Well, then all of a sudden, now you're getting the EV for cheaper and you're saving money in fuel. It's a no-brainer. But without that incentive, the entry cost of that vehicle can't be supported. And so that's where we have to have, you get better pricing with economy of scale. And we're still so early in that market that when you're only making 1,000, you're going to have a hard time getting a low price for that. So you see the same, even going back to like an F-150, you're seeing this, the prices are starting to get a little bit better with incentives. I think Ford's taking a little bit of a bath on a few of them to get that cost down. But when the EV entry launched, it was $10,000, $15,000 more, but you got the tax credit and you get the fuel savings. And so it made economical sense to do that. But you can't get the average consumer wanting to buy a $30,000 car to buy a $100,000 EV and expect the economics of the car make sense. You have to figure out how to get the cost down, the fuel down to where it all makes it to where it's economical. And I think the EV space, the fuel cost is there. I mean, we got energy, we can make energy, and those costs, for the DCFC network is 80% of the cost of gas, but for at-home charging, it's 90% cheaper than the fueling out there in California with Chris. It's like 50% or something like that. Their power rates are crazy out there. However, though, it is still saving you money. Chris has solar, so literally like every day he's getting basically to refuel his truck for free. But that's where that technology is. I think hydrogen, you're bringing down the cost of fuel and the cost of vehicle both, but those things have to really come into motion to see that field expand.
Well, and it's not like we don't have, it's energy. We know energy will always be valuable. It's not like, hydrogen or EVs, people are not going to use those systems because it is energy. It's not like Betamax versus VHS or a Zune versus an iPad, and people went to something else. It's energy, and there will always be the need for energy. And as AI develops, as you have more energy on the grid that's needed, that's going to be something that hydrogen is going to have its place. I think EVs are going to have their place, but just like we said in the beginning, those places are just going to be where we look for them. And as long as we can provide them at a high quality, that's what our goal is.
Yeah, I think the struggle is it's one of scale, as we see so often, and it's one of mindset and so many. Just, I don't know, it's uniquely American, but it definitely is something we struggle with as a country, where we want that instant gratification. We want to be in a TikTok world when we really need to be in more of a documentary kind of world, a long-term deep understanding of something. But nobody wants to sit through 3 hours of a documentary to understand it. And so I think of something as simple as when I became a homeowner and you start making decisions about insulation, and I made a decision about solar, and the initial investment you have to make up front to something when you're just trying to survive and you're just trying to pay the bills, and everybody makes their living attached to the ability for low fuel, and it ripples throughout the entire economy. And in California, it's so prevalent here, where our gas prices are so out of control. And if you go back to the 70s, we used to have 30 oil refineries out here. And then it became 9. And coming soon, it's going to be 7, because we have one in Northern California, where I am, about to close, and we have one in Southern California about to close. And people don't understand, like, this infrastructure was built on that. You talk about Landman, which is one of my favorite shows ever. And he just talks about, in such a simple, straightforward, matter-of-fact way, about everything is built on this, a century of infrastructure. And California has these unique challenges, not just the environmental aspects of it, but the literal infrastructure itself is built for pipelines to be outgoing to Arizona, to Nevada. There are 0 incoming pipelines for California. So when we don't have the oil to come in, you're literally barging this stuff in. And then the stuff that we do pump out of the ground is oftentimes not what the refineries were originally built and set up to do. They were built for a different type of crude oil than, heavy versus light crude. There's these nuances that people don't understand in the market. So this market is almost isolated and in a way that is not necessarily healthy for scale, so that when the cost of that goes up, everything goes up. The transportation goes up. The way you run your business goes up. The manufacturing, everything goes up. So you need it to scale. And my argument for things like electric or hydrogen has always been, you have a finite amount of this resource, and we want to use it where it's required to be used and not use it where it's not required, because it's supply and demand. And if you continue to increase as the population increases and as technology grows, if you continue to use that fuel to power, our grid, if we continue to use it for our commuting, for those simple things, then it becomes more expensive for the transportation of all of the goods and services and things that necessitate cross-country transportation. And it's using the right fuel in the right way. And people don't see that long term. You need the hydrogen. You need these programs, right? There were programs for me in California to insulate my home, to add the solar. These allow you to grow that and to have a businesses and companies. I'm sure Kimbro is planning things out years at a time, and you can't have it pivot and change every 6 months. Or how do you, right?
We like to know what's happening, right? I think as all Americans, Chris, I think you have such a good point there. And I was talking to a lawmaker in North Carolina about a year ago, and he really opened my eyes to some things. He said, Des, I entered office as the biggest clean energy critic probably in the country, and I left office as the biggest clean energy champion. And I said, tell me more. Like, I mean, my background's oil and gas. I want to understand it all. Tell me more. And he said, in America, it's not about making less oil and gas, right? Because what do we do really, really well? We export well. We know how to export oil and gas. We are not as good at exporting wind, solar, electricity, and hydrogen. But what if we could export more oil and gas, get more people off Chinese coal, and still power right here at home? And it was just like the very eye-opening conversation I needed to understand how it's an energy portfolio that will drive us forward. And it's okay to champion one thing and still believe in all the other things too, right? I don't have to tell you that I'm only hydrogen or I'm only EVs when I have a very strong love and passion and understanding for oil and gas. And it's okay to have that full portfolio. And I think that's one of the coolest parts of getting to work with the Kimbro family, is that understanding of the portfolio and the energy needs that power America and that can help power our world.
Power up America.
Let's power it. I agree with him. I agree 100% that's where the focus needs to be. It's not about eliminating oil. It's about using it in the right way.
Absolutely.
And there's just a very diverse and large opportunity, because us in the Southeast, we have great water sources. Like, we can make hydrogen here and use it for our technology here. It may not make as much sense to transport it out to the Midwest, or it might take a long time to get that point. But here we have a great opportunity to make that version of hydrogen, because we can do that with the water we have here and with the opportunities we have here. Energy can be used. Energy is used across the space for all sorts of different things. And so energy can be used to power a data center. But does that come from coal? Does that come from water? Does that come from your dams? Does that come from hydrogen? All those things. Like, there's so many different applications for energy that we don't need to focus strictly on a single version of that, because there's a lot of opportunity to be diverse in that. Solar is a great application, especially for somebody like you, Chris, where the energy cost is very high. You can recover that cost of solar. In East Tennessee, it's a very harder economic decision, because the power is already affordable because of how we have our systems here. But that's where technologies aren't for everyone. It's not like you have to have this or else. It's, hey, that might work best for you. But educate yourself, look at the portfolio of what's offered, and don't be limited down a specific vein just because that's the way you've been told you have to think. There is a application for every technology. My wife drives a gas powered SUV. I drive an electric truck, and that's what works for my family. And, you know, I intend to build my house someday with a few solar panels to help offset energy costs, because there is the economics to make it work. It's a little bit longer, but there's the economics for that. But that's where, as technology continues to emerge, you're not stuck on a specific vein of thinking. You're looking at the emerging technologies, and you see the Kimbro company as an entity has done that evolution as far as understanding that technology emerges and that you're going to be involved in that excellence. But as a consumer, if you're listening, like, continue to look at what is the opportunities within the workplace, within the family, that you can implement that makes economic sense. If you drive 100 miles around town every day and come back to your house, you could save a lot of money if you can find an economically affordable EV that works for you. But the
best part is we want to be the company that can serve all of those choices.
Correct. But if you take a boat and you're towing it to Colorado from East Tennessee, like, you need a gas powered F-350 to get you from here to there. And that's the way that it exists. And that's great.
And the smart people are doing this stuff. I mean, Kimbro is doing it at a micro level what places like Norway and Saudi Arabia are doing at a macro level. And those are big oil rich countries that are looking at those investments in, with Saudi Arabia into Lucid. There's Jesse popping back there. All right. Welcome back, man. And, Norway, where I'm heading in a couple of weeks, they have just a huge oil and gas infrastructure there, but they've pivoted where it makes sense to use the energy where it makes sense. And those two countries are incredibly rich in terms of what they can do in their communities and for the people, because they're using the energy and their resources in the right way. And so, yeah, to your point of exporting and using it, like I say, I want that to be something that we think of more long-term in that way. So I think Kimbro is completely on the right track with how they're doing that. You would never put all of your investments into one thing in your 401k. You want to be diversified in all ways. And it's true with energy, up in the Northeast where you have Niagara Falls producing a tremendous amount of energy. Doesn't make sense to put solar in where the days are shorter and the winters are rougher, where it does in California and Arizona and Nevada. And so put wind where it belongs, put solar where it belongs, hydrogen where it belongs, put them where they belong and use them to the benefit of everybody.
Absolutely. Well, Des, thank you so much for joining the conversation. Appreciate your insights and helping tell that story. If you're listening, have questions, comment below. We'll bring her back on and have another chat sometime soon.
We won't wait another year and a half.
Des, any final thoughts that you would like to share with us?
No, just super excited to see, where Power Up is going and all the opportunities in front of us right now on this EV side. And thankful for the opportunity to work with you guys. And like I said, I'm ready to get Manchester open in Kentucky. It's going to be fun. You guys have got big shoes to fill. I'm going out on maternity leave in 2 weeks. And when I get back, I hope we're ready to open and have that ribbon cutting. So we're excited.
And we had a bet that we'd have a site open by like September, and we're not going to meet that deadline. So
but I'm excited to get my free dinner. So
yes.
Yep.
It is what it is.
I appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing.
So.
49 days. Can we just put a charger in somewhere and make it count?
Yep. Not going to happen.
Anyway,
that's okay. We're going to get that baby open by the end of this year. It's going to be awesome. So
absolutely.
excited for where Power Up is going and also how it is serving the end use consumer, because that is the goal.
Thank you all.
Much more details to come on that. Obviously, we spent 2 weeks in a row talking about that, but we have a heavy push coming in the next 6 months that we'll walk everybody along and show you kind of how we've built that first site as a statement piece. But stay tuned and like and subscribe, turn down for what. We'll continue to share information like this on the Power Up story and how we've gotten to where we're at and where we're going. But also we, post the weekly news and updates. So stay tuned for that. But for today, that is all. Tune in on Thursday. We should be having another live stream with Martin and Jace going over some of the cool technical stuff. It's about 2 hours of live stream where you can ask any questions, and we'll be back next week for an interesting conversation around level 2s in multifamily homes. So that's all for today. Like and subscribe to Turn Down for What, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to tune in to more EV news and updates. See you next time.